What if the most dangerous monster in your town wasn't hiding in the shadows, but sitting quietly behind the door next to yours? The night was restless in the suburbs of Chicago. A storm rolled across the skies, lightning cracking like glass above the quiet streets. Inside every home, parents tucked their children in early. But at the corner of Ridgewood Lane, a mother named Angela Morris screamed in panic. Her little daughter, Emily, had not come home. Emily was only 9 years old, the kind of girl who loved chasing fireflies and drawing pictures with chalk on the sidewalk. She was playful, curious, and never stayed out past dark. But now, her bike lay abandoned near the park, wheels still spinning when Angela found it. The neighbors gathered quickly. Porch lights flicked on one after another, casting nervous shadows on the street. Within minutes, police cars arrived, their sirens cutting through the storm. Detective Sarah Coleman, a sharp but weary officer, stepped onto the scene. She had seen cases like this before, too many of them ending in heartbreak. She questioned Angela, who clutched Emily's favorite pink jacket to her chest, trembling as though her heart had already shattered. "Did anyone see her leave the park?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but heavy. No one had. Children playing earlier remembered seeing Emily laughing, her chalk-stained hands waving goodbye, but then, nothing. She had vanished as if the night itself had swallowed her whole. Flyers were printed within hours, plastered on lampposts, store windows, and telephone poles. Angela's voice cracked on the news as she begged the city for help, but whispers began to rise in the neighborhood. Some spoke of the strange man in apartment 13B, Peter Wallace, a quiet, reclusive figure who never smiled, never spoke, and whose blinds never opened. Rumors spread about the odd smell from his apartment, the sound of furniture dragging late at night, the way his eyes lingered too long on children at the playground. Angela didn't want to believe the rumors, not when her daughter's life hung in the balance. But that night, as thunder rolled and rain hammered her windows, she swore she heard something faint in the distance, something that pierced the storm, a muffled cry, and in her bones she knew it was Emily. The neighborhood began to realize the chilling truth. The danger was not a stranger passing through. It lived among them. Detective Sarah Coleman sat in her car long after the search party had dispersed. Rain streaked down her windshield like tears, and her gut told her something wasn't right. Children don't just vanish without a trace. Someone had taken Emily, and that someone was close. Too close. The next morning, Sarah returned to Ridgewood Lane. Neighbors gathered, their faces pale, voices hushed. Many avoided looking at the building at the far end of the street, the old apartment block where Peter Wallace lived in 13B. Mrs. Hernandez, an elderly woman from the third floor, whispered nervously, "I heard banging last night, like furniture dragging. But when I went out, the hallway was silent." Another neighbor added, "And the smell, like bleach, strong. I almost called maintenance." Sarah's instincts sharpened. She walked the hallway toward apartment 13B. The door looked ordinary. Cheap wood, brass knob, a faded number nailed crookedly. But standing before it, Sarah felt a chill crawl across her skin. She knocked. Silence. She knocked harder. Finally, the door opened just enough for Peter Wallace to appear. His eyes were pale, his expression unreadable. His voice was flat when he said, "Detective, I already spoke to the officers last night. I don't know the girl." Sarah studied him closely. His shirt was buttoned wrong, his hair damp as if he had recently showered. Behind him, the apartment looked dark, shadows swallowing the furniture. And then she noticed something. A faint pink thread stuck to the cuff of his sleeve. Emily's jacket had been pink. Her pulse quickened. "Mind if I come in, Mr. Wallace?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "Without a warrant, detective?" "No." The door shut with a final click, and Sarah was left staring at her own reflection in the peephole's glassy eye. That night, her mind replayed the image of Wallace's sleeve, the thread, the cold emptiness in his voice. Something was inside that apartment, something he was desperate to keep hidden. At 2 a.m., Angela called her, voice shaking. "Detective, I swear I heard Emily's cry again. It came from that building. From him." Sarah gripped the phone, her decision made. Tomorrow, she would return with backup. Because apartment 13B wasn't just suspicious, it was screaming to be opened. The morning sun broke through the clouds, but Ridgewood Lane still felt heavy with fear. Parents clutched their children's hands tighter, and every glance drifted toward the old brick apartment building. Detective Sarah Coleman returned, this time with 2 uniformed officers and a warrant. Angela Morris stood on the sidewalk, her face pale, whispering prayers under her breath. She begged Sarah, "Please, find my Emily." The building's hallways smelled damp and stale. The officers' boots echoed as they climbed to the second floor. And then, finally, they stood before apartment 13B. Sarah raised her hand. Knock, knock, knock. No answer. The warrant gave her the right. The officers rammed the door open, wood splintering as it swung wide. The smell hit them first, a sharp chemical stench of bleach mixed with something darker, metallic. The living room was eerily neat, too neat. Not a speck of dust, not a wrinkle on the couch cushion. On the coffee table sat a single glass of water, untouched. But the blinds were clamped shut, blocking out the daylight, and the silence pressed against their ears. "Clear the rooms," Sarah ordered. The officers moved cautiously. Bedroom empty, kitchen spotless, bathroom unnervingly sterile, lined with bottles of bleach and scrubbing brushes. But then Sarah noticed something odd near the living room wall. A large, heavy bookcase, bolted down tight. The floorboards beneath it showed faint scratch marks, as though it had been moved, dragged across the floor, again and again. Her chest tightened. "Help me shift this!" The officers heaved. The bookcase groaned, scraping against the floor. Behind it was a locked metal door, its surface scratched, dented, and sealed with 3 thick bolts. Sarah's breath caught. This shouldn't be here. She pressed her ear against the door. At first, nothing, only the hum of silence. But then, a faint sound, like a whimper, a child's whimper. "Emily?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The officers exchanged panicked looks. They began forcing the bolts, but before they could break through, a voice echoed from the doorway. It was Peter Wallace. He stood calmly, holding a grocery bag, his expression cold as stone. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, his voice almost mocking. The whimper behind the door went silent. Sarah's heart raced. She had found the secret, but opening that door might unleash horrors no one was ready to face. The tension inside apartment 13B was suffocating. Detective Sarah Coleman stared at Peter Wallace, her pulse hammering in her ears. The 2 officers flanked her. "Aye, sure," hands tightening on their weapons, waiting for her command. Peter's eyes were calm, disturbingly calm, as if he had expected them. He set the grocery bag on the counter and with an unsettling half-smile said, "You don't understand what's behind that door." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Open it. Now!" For a moment, Peter simply stood there, his silence stretching like a blade against her nerves. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "No one ever leaves that room once they go inside. You think you're saving her, but you're already too late." Her blood turned cold. "Force it open!" she ordered. The officers slammed their shoulders into the metal door. The bolts screeched, one snapping loose. The second gave way with a violent clang. As they struggled with the third, Sarah kept her weapon trained on Peter, whose lips moved silently as though he were whispering to himself, prayers or curses she couldn't tell. Finally, the last bolt broke. The door swung open. A wave of stench rolled out, thick, rotten, suffocating. The air inside the hidden chamber was damp, stale, and unbearably heavy. Sarah raised her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. What she saw made her knees weaken. The small chamber's walls were lined with photographs, Polaroids, dozens of them, taped in uneven rows, all of children, some smiling, some crying, some with eyes so hollow they looked like shadows of life itself. Beneath the photos sat a collection of broken toys, dolls with torn faces, toy cars with missing wheels, stuffed animals ripped apart, and then, in the corner, a single small shoe, pink. Sarah's heart seized. Emily's shoe. Angela's voice echoed in her head, her daughter's laugh, her desperate pleas for help. Sarah scanned the chamber frantically, but Emily wasn't there. Only silence. Behind her, Peter's voice broke the stillness. She cried louder than the others. "That's why you found me." Rage surged through Sarah, but beneath it, terror grew. Emily had been here, but where was she now? The chamber wasn't a prison anymore. It was a graveyard of memories. And Emily's fate was slipping through Sarah's fingers. The chamber inside apartment 13B was sealed off, crime scene tape stretching across its entrance like a warning. Neighbors gathered in silence outside the building, clutching their children, whispering about the nightmare unfolding so close to home. Inside, Peter Wallace sat handcuffed to a metal chair at the precinct, his face blank, his eyes distant. Detective Sarah Coleman stood across from him, holding Emily's pink shoe in her hand like a weapon of truth. "Where is she?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling with anger. "Where is Emily Morris?" Peter tilted his head slightly, as though considering the question. Then, with a voice chillingly calm, he whispered, "Not here. Not anymore." Sarah slammed her fist onto the table. "Stop playing games. You had her in that room. We heard her cry." A faint smile tugged at Peter's lips. "Children cry everywhere, Detective. Sometimes you just don't listen until it's too late." Her stomach nodded. She leaned in closer. "Listen to me, Wallace. If she's alive, you have one chance to save her. Tell me where she is." For the first time, his expression shifted. His eyes flickered with something. Fear? Regret? Or satisfaction? He leaned forward, whispering so softly Sarah had to strain to hear. "Check the tunnels. The old storm drains beneath Ridgewood Park. That's where she loves to hide." Sarah froze. Ridgewood Park was where Emily's bike had been found. The storm drains stretched for miles, dark, flooded, dangerous. A child lost in them wouldn't last long. "Why?" she hissed. "Why, children? Why, Emily?" Peter's smile returned, thin and venomous. "Because silence is louder than screams. And Emily had the loudest voice of all." Sarah's heart pounded. She turned, storming out of the room, shouting for her team. The clock was ticking. If Emily was in those tunnels, every second mattered. Outside, Angela waited, her hands shaking as she clutched a photograph of her daughter. Sarah knelt in front of her. "We might know where she is, but we need to move fast." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "Please, bring her back." Sarah stood, determination burning in her chest. This wasn't just about solving a case anymore. It was about saving a little girl's life. And the tunnels of Ridgewood Park were waiting. The hatch at Ridgewood Park opened with a shriek of rusted metal. Damp, foul air rolled out, reeking of mold and stagnant water. Detective Sarah Coleman switched on her flashlight and steadied her nerves. Below her stretched the storm drains, a place of darkness, secrets, and now, perhaps, the cries of a missing child. Angela clutched Emily's stuffed rabbit, her face pale. "She hates the dark," she whispered, tears streaming. "Please, don't let her be alone down there." "You have my word," Sarah said before lowering herself onto the ladder. The tunnel swallowed her instantly. Cold water lapped against her boots as the beam of her flashlight cut across walls covered in mildew. Each drip of water echoed like footsteps behind her. She wasn't alone. Officers followed, but the silence pressed heavy, like the place itself was alive. "Emily!" Sarah's voice rang through the drains. "It's Detective Coleman! We're here to help!" At first there was nothing. Then, faint, almost too faint to trust. A whimper. Her heart quickened. She motioned for her team to move. The sound grew clearer, but so did another noise. Metal scraping stone. Slow. Intentional. They rounded a bend and froze. A doll floated in the water, as porcelain face cracked, half submerged. A note was pinned to its chest, the words scrawled in jagged strokes. "Not every cry belongs to the living." A chill tightened Sarah's spine. One officer swore under his breath. Suddenly, the water surged, rising against their knees. Rain from earlier was filling the drains fast. Trash and broken branches swirled past. Time was running out. "Detective!" someone shouted. "Over here!" Sarah splashed forward, her light swinging wildly. The tunnel widened into a chamber, and her beam landed on a small figure crouched against the wall. Her breath caught. Emily. The girl's face was smeared with dirt, her eyes swollen from crying. "Mommy," she whispered, reaching out with trembling hands. Sarah's throat tightened. "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you." She took a step closer, but then a shadow shifted. Behind Emily, a tall figure detached itself from the wall. He moved slowly, deliberately, dragging something metallic that screeched against the concrete. Sarah's light caught the object, a heavy chain. The girl whimpered louder, shrinking into the corner. Sarah raised her gun, her voice steady despite the dread clawing at her chest. "Step away from her!" The figure didn't obey. Instead, he lingered at the edge of the chamber, half hidden in the dark. Then, just for a heartbeat, the beam revealed his face. Sunken eyes, gaunt cheeks, a twisted half-smile that froze the blood in her veins. Peter Wallace, alive, waiting. Emily was caught between them, the innocent in a nightmare about to explode. Sarah tightened her grip on the trigger. The storm drains roared around her, the water climbing higher. She knew there would be no turning back. The final confrontation had begun. The storm drains roared with rushing water, rising inch by inch, threatening to swallow everything. The chamber smelled of rust and decay, the concrete walls slick with moss. Emily whimpered from the corner, her small hands trembling as she clutched the filthy hem of her dress. Detective Sarah Coleman stood between the girl and the figure lurking at the edge of the chamber. Her flashlight quivered as it illuminated his face. Hollow eyes, pale skin stretched thin, a smile carved with madness. Peter Wallace, the city's most infamous predator, long thought dead. "Step away from her," Sarah barked, raising her gun. Peter tilted his head, dragging a chain in a lazy arc across the floor. "Always the protector, but tell me, detective, do you protect because you care, or because you fear what happens if you fail?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "Emily, don't move. Keep your eyes on me, sweetheart." The girl nodded, her lips trembling. Peter's laugh rattled like air escaping a corpse. "You hear her cries? They sound just like the others. Do you know how many I called down here? How many followed my voice, thinking salvation waited in the dark?" Her chest ached, but she kept her aim steady. "You're finished, Peter. It ends tonight." He stepped closer, water splashing around his boots. "Oh no," he whispered. "It only begins again. Monsters like me never end. We live in stories, in nightmares, in the silence children fear when the lights go out." The chain swung suddenly, striking the wall with a metallic scream. Emily shrieked, pressing herself into the corner. "Stay back!" Sarah shouted, heart pounding. For a tense heartbeat, neither moved. The water surged higher, swirling around their thighs. Time was slipping away. Sarah steadied her breath, lowering her voice. "Emily, listen to me. On my count, I want you to run. I'll catch you. Understand?" Tears streamed down the girl's face, but she gave a faint nod. Peter sneered. "Do you think she trusts you more than me? I've been her lullaby in the dark. You're too late." Sarah ignored him. 1. Peter raised the chain. 2. Emily tensed, ready to spring. Peter lunged forward. 3. Emily bolted, water splashing. The chain whipped down, but Sarah fired. The gunshot thundered, deafening in the chamber. Peter staggered back, blood mixing with the water. The chain clattered uselessly. Sarah swept Emily into her arms, holding her tight. "I've got you. You're safe," Peter howled, clutching his wound, his voice ragged. "Do you think saving one child erases the others? Their faces will follow you. Their voices will haunt you. You'll never silence me." Sarah's eyes burned, but her voice cut sharp. "No, Peter. The difference is I'll never stop trying." Backup thundered down the tunnels. Flashlights carved through the dark as officers swarmed in. Within moments, Peter was dragged away in restraints, screaming like a cornered beast, his words echoing in the chamber. "The dark will always find another voice." Sarah held Emily tighter, feeling the girl's tiny heartbeat racing against her chest. Hours later, outside the drains, the night air hit Sarah like a baptism. Angela collapsed into sobs as Emily was placed in her arms. Their cries mingled, grief, relief, love. Sarah stepped back, her own chest aching. Tonight's victory would never erase the darkness. The cracked doll, the carved note, Peter's words, those would live with her forever. But as Emily buried her face into her mother's shoulder, Sarah knew this. For one little girl, the nightmare had ended. And sometimes that was enough. The press would later call it the storm drain miracle. Headlines would celebrate the rescue, condemn the monster, and praise Sarah's courage. But Sarah never read them because she knew the truth. Evil doesn't end in chains. It lingers in shadows, waiting for cracks in the light. And so she stood silently by the park, the sound of rushing water still in her ears, vowing to herself, as long as monsters walk in the dark, I'll keep walking into it. Yet as Peter's ambulance pulled away, a chill ran down her spine. Through the chaos, she remembered his final whisper, I am not the only one.